The same goes for us at the commission too. We love hearing from people who are applying. There's no such thing as a silly question. So more than happy to field any questions, and we'll start by now. So Fabiola, I answered a few in the chat. I'll just go back over them in case they were missed. But Fabiola asked, she's an Austrian clinician working in Australia. She wants to know, is there any way past the citizenship rule? Unfortunately not. In terms of the Australian program, we can only offer scholarships to Australian citizens. However, the program operates in about 160 different countries around the world. So I've just sent the Fulbright Austria link to Fabiola, but if you're from if your home country is not Australia, do a bit of Googling. I'm sure there'll be a commission in your country through which you can apply. Someone else asked if for the postdoc scholarship, does the 5-year period post PhD apply to the time of application or the time of placement? And it would be the application time, but also there are some exceptions to that rule if you've had career interruptions or things like that. If it's been 10 years since your PhD, then the scholar category would be a better category for you to apply in rather than the postdoctoral. Jesse wanted to know if the person is currently enrolled in a PhD, but by the time of the commencement date, they've submitted their PhD, would you apply as a postdoctoral or postgrad? I think, yeah, Josh covered that. Yeah, you'd apply as a postdoc if you submitted your PhD by the time your program would commence, and all we need is a letter that from your supervisor, for example, that states that you're on track to have your PhD conferred by the time your program would begin. The website doesn't list the full PhD in the US as an option in the postgrad category. That's because the full PhD program is only available for those who've applied for the Fulbright Future Scholarship in the postgraduate category. So basically the Fulbright Future Scholarship is an award that is available in all of the categories. You just have to tick a box on the checklist and you'll be considered for that award along with the general category awards. You also need to provide a 1-page impact statement that talks about how your research or study can improve the livelihoods, health, well-being of Australia and Australians. That program covers covers full tuition for masters or PhD students. And yet you can undertake a full 5-year PhD in the US via that particular program with all the tuition expenses covered. So it's an extremely well-funded scholarship. So a couple more. A few questions have come in. Okay, so I'll hand these over to the panel. So Britt mentioned about letters of invitation to the US. For a master's program, you do not need a letter of invitation. However, if you're applying for a postgraduate visiting student researcher, so if you're applying to go over to do part of your PhD in the US, you will need a letter of invitation from a proposed host institution. Or if you're applying in the postdoc or scholar categories, you do need letters of invitation. So I'll hand over to either Stephen or Josh to talk about how they secured those letters of invitation.
I can answer this because I did it more recently. My opinion on this is that the Fulbright Scholarship Program is an extremely prestigious program. So when going for or trying to figure out which lab or which group you should collaborate with, you should aim for one of the world leads in whatever your field is. So a big component of my PhD research was AI in surgery. And through that, I learned a lot about the different types of AI and also read through a lot of the literature and particularly a lot of the world-leading literature. So this group in Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Beverly Hills, which is under the Andrew Hung lab, which is mainly a robotic surgery and AI lab. Through my end of my PhD, I read a lot of their work, particularly in the benefits of AI for surgical training and also surgical outcome prediction. So pretty much after I had established that this was a group I'd be interested in learning from and collaborating with in the future, I just simply reached out to them. And I knew that I had a trip to the USA actually planned for other reasons earlier in the year for that I was planning to apply for. So during that time, I made the effort, rearranged a lot of things to prioritize physically meeting Dr. Hung and also looking at the actual site that we proposed to set this up in the future. I think there is benefit of doing that in person if you're able to do it because it secures a stronger relationship, which is mainly the thing that you want. Um, Obviously, it has to be something that you're interested in. And I think doubling down on something that's part of your PhD is a strength. But of course, if you have a new interest outside of your PhD, it's also perfectly fine. The benefit of the Fulbright program being so prestigious is that even the top groups in the US and the world are keen and interested in collaborating with you through the Fulbright program because it also has benefits for their research and their international collaborations as well. So after you establish that connection, either through in-person or virtual or simply email correspondence, you simply need to be open with your interests and your goals from the fellowship program. And then also sort of just say, this is what I need from a letter of invitation and sort of discuss that process as we go. Of course, there are a lot of specifics of what you'll be doing during your time, and that is mainly worked out with your group, and it's what your group is comfortable with. So I would have goals for during the time and also with regards to the international collaboration that you have planned after. So for example, for mine, we have like a lot of things that I'll be learning about in the field of AI and robotic surgery, and the group's research during that fellowship period. But then I'll be supervising a PhD student, which is essentially implementing a lot of their AI work in an Australian centre. And the PhD students' goals is mainly to develop these systems for a different type of surgery, laparoscopic surgery. So I would recommend having similar goals and similar approaches when approaching your US centre for your Fulbright.
Great answer. How about you, Stephen? Do you have any thoughts on? I think Fulbright. We've had quite a few Fulbright scholars at MGH, so there's a pretty strong relationship between, I think, the Australian medical research community and MGH. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you went about getting that letter of invitation.
Yeah, spot on, Alex. So mine was a lot more based on existing relationships. So acknowledging that if you can, going overseas ahead of time would be great. It's not always possible with rosters and leave and relievers or no relievers. So sometimes it will be via email and Zoom. And that's where having an established connection is invaluable because, people are busy. Cold emails sometimes go through the keeper. But if you know someone who knows someone, then it really makes the pathway work a lot better because, it's a referral you can trust, so to speak. And I was fortunate to know several people who had been to MGH previously and essentially worked through pathways of people who knew each other. And it's been absolutely wonderful. And I think that's where, again, if you do know people who have gone to the centre that you would like to go to, working with them, reaching out to them and learning more about it through them is a really good place to start.
Absolutely. But that's not to say that you can't be the trailblazing conduit for a collaborative relationship between your institution and a US institution. I think I definitely agree. It's easier if you can get a referral because then you're not just cold emailing. But American researchers seem to love getting cold emails, particularly if you have done your own research, you know what they're doing, you demonstrate enthusiasm for the work you're doing, and you put forward your own work and say, hey, this is what I'm keen to do to collab with you on. Chances are you'll get a reply at the very least. Don't be afraid to drop the Fulbright name in the email too, because it's an extremely well recognized program in the United States. And if you say, I'm applying for Fulbright, I'm looking at doing this, interested in your research, that magic combination could get you a really interesting, or could be a spark to a really interesting conversation that could lead you to a letter of invitation. And really all it requires on their end is to, on institutional letterhead, right? Yep, we're willing to host this person for 4 months, or for 6 months, for 8 months. And that's really all that needs to be added to your application.
Yeah, and if I could just jump in quickly, I think more so than the method that you reach out to these people, so the most common and easiest ways is either via email or LinkedIn, in my opinion. But I think the thing that has more association with your success from forming this relationship is doing your background work ahead of time. So when I went, I had read this research lab's work back to front. I knew a lot of the work that they were doing, had some of my own ideas of potential projects or potential things that we could possibly do. Of course, I hadn't developed them, but I went in knowing a lot of the details ahead of time. And I think then you're actually primed for a proper discussion that is more likely to result in a reality, rather than just saying, I'm interested in doing a fellowship without having looked at anything, which is also like fine. If you can actually get a successful Fulbright scholarship experience just doing that and then leaving it to the group to see what they're comfortable with. But my opinion is that do your background work, go in, make it a more efficient experience for them, and something that you can fit in a lot more seamlessly as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there are a couple of sort of related questions that I might just quickly tackle out of order. Jesse wanted to know if you need to know the specifics of what you'll research during your Fulbright scholarship period, if awarded, or can the specifics be sorted further down the track? So as mentioned, when you're reaching out, you don't necessarily need to know the exact project. You could, as Josh said, you could suggest a few different possibilities during your application, because you need that letter of invitation, and because you need to really, quite specifically note the method and the potential outcomes in your application. You definitely need to have a really concrete idea of what you'll be doing at the time of application. If you're doing research, but if you're going down Britt's path, if you're doing a master's degree, you don't necessarily need to know all the details. You don't even need to know the exact institution that you'll be studying at, because at the time of application, you won't necessarily have been accepted into that program. So you can mention a couple of different programs, but you don't need to know the specifics. So how might you recommend approaching US contacts? So are there any other ways that anyone, you could give them a call, or the time zones, or you have to stay up a bit late to get in touch? I think email is probably the best method of getting in touch to begin, or LinkedIn, as Josh mentioned. Yeah, if there are any other platforms that researchers or clinicians use that I'm not aware of, that they might be, like there might be some kind of secret doctor's Twitter or something. I'm not sure, but
I think sorry. I just want to say ResearchGate is another one. But sorry, Britt, you go.
No, this is slightly on a different note, but I have found LinkedIn incredibly useful. I never really thought of it as a helpful tool as a doctor, but if you're considering kind of those creative careers in medicine that aren't just clinical medicine, whether that be public health, international development, humanitarian aid, politics, health policy, so much of it is happening on LinkedIn, and you can follow people's career paths and see what type of opportunities they've done, whether it is domestic or abroad. So I highly recommend having a little look on there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you know which university or institution, doesn't necessarily have to be university, will be best placed as an appropriate site? Is there information relating to this? I think, it's been talked about already, but I think Google's going to be your best friend, looking up who's doing the world leading research in your particular field, which lab is working on, if you're doing something really niche or esoteric, like which lab is leading the way, or doing something interesting, or doing something that you feel that you could make a contribution to. That's another thing about Fulbright, is it's very two-way. It's not just about what you can gain from the US, it's also what you can provide. So that's a good way to think about it when writing your application. Feel free to jump in if there's anything else that you guys want to mention about that. So here's a really good question though. This person's enrolled in an Australian PhD, planning to apply for a postgraduate degree. Is there anything on your CV or reference letters or any other component of the application that you believe made yours stand out, or maybe gave you an edge over other applications? I'll get all three of your answers on this. Britt, what do you reckon?
Oh, that's such a hard answer. Question to answer. I think what made me stand out was this idea that I wanted to do something beyond clinical med, and I had a really strong driven vision, and I had that was within my project statement. And then when I got the interview, that was also in the interview. I think they want to see a strong personal voice, that you're staying true to yourself. You're not just making things up for the sake of trying to get into the program. And they want to see that you hold true to that throughout the whole process. So as much as possible, I know it sounds hard, but trying to stay true to what you like, and writing that as eloquently as you can in the application should hopefully get you a bit closer to the line.
That's such a good answer. Absolutely agree. I think genuine, and authentic are two real keywords that I would apply to every successful application. Don't just think about, what do these people want to hear or want to read. Stay true to what you want to achieve, what you want to contribute, and what you want to bring back, and that will give you the strongest possible application. Stephen, what do you reckon? What made yours stand out?
I think it was my winning personality. No, but seriously, I had fairly tangible plans. I think that was probably one of the more unique aspects of my application, possibly. I have very clear plans about things I want to contribute to the US and also bring back to Australia. I plan on executing those fully. So it wasn't purely theoretical. I mean, there's certainly an important role for basic science and esoteric theory, but I had some very tangible plans that I wanted to deliver, and I plan on doing so.
Yep, absolutely. I definitely think your project statement is, you really have to be quite specific. If you're doing research, really be specific about what you want to achieve, and like I said, what you want to contribute, what you want to bring back. I think they're really good things to keep in mind when you're writing. Josh, how about you?
Yeah, I think particularly as both other speakers mentioned, I think particularly if you're going for the Fulbright Future category, which is the scholarship that I've gotten, like Stephen has gotten as well, you need to demonstrate that you're doing something that's true to your personal ambitions, and that is also something that's striving to benefit Australian and US societies overall. And I think that's something that you have to really tease out to show that you have real plan, that you're serious about these real plans through your research to translate to benefiting both societies internationally. So I'll give mine as an example. Through this Fulbright Scholarship, I'll be working with one of the lead groups in AI and robotic surgery. The main translations of that research is one, benefits of objectivity and increase tracking of progress in accredited surgical training, which we propose and we will plan towards working towards integrating into Australian training to benefit surgery across the nation. Then also in outcome prediction after surgery as well. So this will benefit the patient population as well, regardless of where surgery is being conducted. Then to sort of answer the other part of the question as well, on your CV, I think the Fulbright Commission really likes to see that you've done things that an ambassador for Australia would have done. So in my background, in addition to my research, I've tried to sort of be an advocate for benefiting collaborative research as well. So I've started a couple of collaboratives at places I've gone, mainly to empower medical students and junior doctors in getting started in research as well. Also, I've tried to publicize a lot of our research findings as well, and as a result have been involved in media publicization of our research as well. So I think the Fulbright Commission, it doesn't have to be those things specifically, but they really like it if you've gone above and beyond or done something to sort of bring out your personal advocacy and personal research as well. That will show long-term benefit for Australian and US societies.
So a really interesting question. If someone's asking if there have been any successful applicants or previously US citizens, but have let go of their citizenship and have not lived in the US since childhood, that's asking about that citizenship rule, because of course, you can't be a US citizen and apply for a Fulbright scholarship in Australia. You can apply in the US to visit other countries, but you can't go the other way. So I think if you've like officially relinquished, I don't know if that's the right term, if you're no longer a US citizen officially, then you can apply. But if you are still a US citizen, then just the way the program is set up, it's set up via a bilateral treaty. So the wording of that treaty is that it's for Australian citizens to visit the United States, Americans to visit Australia. So as long as you've officially relinquished your citizenship, you can still apply. So any chance that undertaking postgrad med school might be considered a research career interruption? If that's so that you can apply in the postdoc category, I think the career interruptions are more related to like personal circumstances rather than sort of different aspects of your career. But the 5-year rule is a little bit, it's not super strict. So if you're just 6 months shy or something, then just reach out to us by email and we can discuss how that might work or alternative pathways. You mentioned, this is a really good one. You mentioned ambassadorial skills as a selection criterion. Could you please give some examples of this that are relevant to clinicians? So ambassadorial skills, it's a really tricky one. It can mean different things to different people. So let's hear from each of the panelists. Britt, what do you think ambassadorial skills are, and how do you think you addressed them, both during your application and the interview?
Mm-hmm. It's a really good question. I actually think as clinicians, we're really well placed to answer this question, because if you think about ambassadorial skills in my head, I think about communication, negotiation, respect, equity. And those are all things that I think we all hold dear and make us good doctors. So there's a lot of case examples within clinical medicine that would work here. In terms of my interview, I remember getting a question, how would you manage if someone had preconceived ideas about Australians, or vice versa? How would you kind of manage that situation? I think that's another great question that it relates to ambassadorial skills. And it's something maybe you guys can think about in your heads, because I know that as an Australian, I had preconceived ideas about what America was going to be like that I can say now aren't necessarily true. And when I'm here, people have very funny opinions about Australians. Sometimes they love Australians, so don't worry. But the scary animals and all of these different ideas that aren't necessarily true as well. So I guess that transcultural communication and getting over biases is also a really good skill to have.
Yep. Great answer. Totally agree. How about you, Stephen? What are your thoughts on ambassadorial skills?
I think that the way I frame it is around like concrete examples. When I was a medical student, I did an overseas rotation in Montreal in neurology. And when I went over there, I went and brought some of the educational approaches that we were using in Australia. They were integrated into their course with some asynchronous learning content. And then over there, they were doing a lot of script concordance test question research. So then returned to Australia and conducted some primary research projects around the types of educational approaches they were using. So I think that, in embodying some of the learning approaches we were using and contributing to that cultural exchange, I served as an ambassador in that role. And I think trying to emulate that in future and build upon it is how I'd approach an ambassadorial role, and still am.
Yep, excellent. Josh, how about you? What are your thoughts on ambassadorial skills?
I think a simple way to think about this is like the formal positions of like an Australian ambassador or US ambassador. Think about what sort of qualities they need in their roles. So the things that I think about, as Britt mentioned before, is like this excellent communication, particularly on the public stage. And so you need to be an advocate for not only Australian society, but you need to be an advocate for international collaboration. And you need to be a serious advocate for a cause, in my opinion. So something that I think in my background that I think was a good thing in that exemplified my ambassadorial skills was that I've previously been an advocate or tried to set up collaborative research through actually going through and setting up formal research initiatives. Also recently, and this is something that I talked about a lot in my application and interview, is that I'm a true believer and strong advocate for rural healthcare work and rural healthcare research to benefit populations in rural Australia as well. So this is something I've undertaken via setting up a research collaborative in Ballarat and plan to seriously be involved in after my Fulbright fellowship is completed as well. So I think things that you can do at an initial stage to benefit or exemplify your ambassadorial skills are simply things that make your research or your cause more public. So that means talking about your research, particularly in public settings, so public speaking about it. The easiest one to do is in local forums or conferences, particularly at local, national, or international stages. Then also trying to publish broader, so in both refereed or like peer-reviewed publication avenues and also non-refereed things as well. You can also advocate through the written word through that. Posting about your research on LinkedIn, so bringing it to the broader community. And then also, if you have opportunities to do it, being involved in media coverage of your academic work as well, which is something that myself and Stephen have and currently are involved in quite regularly. Those are sort of the ways that I think about exemplifying your ambassadorial skills. But of course, it works in a variety of ways for each individual. I think the main thing is about actually standing behind a cause that you believe in and want to advocate for that will benefit Australian and US societies.
And Vegemite and Tim Tams.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And that's a really good point, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be something in your professional life. It can be, you could be advocating for your local swim team or for, I don't know, your daughter's school carnival or something. Like there are various examples of ambassadorial skills that are both within and outside of your professional sphere, and it'll be different for everyone, but I'm sure everyone listening here has something that they're really passionate about and want to advocate for on the public stage.
I'll just mention,
yeah, go ahead.
Very briefly to that, a lot of people have said that I'm the first Australian they've ever met. So I think when they're asking this question, it's are you going to represent Australia? It's very real because some people haven't met Australians.
Absolutely, those skills, they do, they do come in handy, and people are chosen to be Fulbright scholars for very particular reasons related to those ambassadorial skills. So, definitely consider how, why you're being asked that question and how you might apply those skills in a US setting. So are we proposing an area of study, an existing area of study, or do we tap into a new area of study, or do we tap into an existing area of study currently being undertaken? It can be either. You can be thinking of doing something novel, or you can be heading over to learn from something and contribute to something that's currently ongoing. The main thing that you want to think about is the selection committees are going to be asking themselves the question, why does this project have to be done in the US? Why is the US the best destination for this person? Can this research be just as easily conducted in Australia? And you have to answer that question in your application. So how likely are you to get chosen if if an American institution is willing to adopt you for 4 to 8 months? A lot more likely than you probably think. This isn't like a sort of 0.2% success rate, ARC grant kind of situation with Fulbright. Like we get a lot fewer applications than you probably think, and quite a large proportion of bona fide applications become successful Fulbright scholars. So it's significant. So are you able to apply for a postdoc if you've previously completed a prestigious postgrad scholarship like Rhodes and Monash, Gates, etc.? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's almost, you can definitely include that in your application. You just can't have you can't have a Rhodes or a Monash and a Fulbright at the same time. You can't have a scholarship that covers the exact same expenses. So there was a question also in the chat about the Frank Knox fellowship that Britt is on, and because that scholarship covers different things to what the Fulbright scholarship covers, it's fine. But because the Monash the expenses would be you'd be doubling up on funding. That's the only thing that's not allowed. So there was one question for Josh, just about anything in particular when you first reached out to your group that you mentioned or discussed that helped develop that initial rapport and get you that invitation.
Yeah, I think, like I said, the easiest way is to do your background homework, not only on the field that you're proposing the research in, but also on the group itself. I think the easiest way to do this is through Google Scholar, where you actually go through and read their most recent work, particularly over the last couple of years. And then through Google more generally, go to the lab's official pages, go to the lab leads official pages, actually look at what their work has been over the last few years and what their future goals are. Because a lot of these websites will actually say what their future goals are as well. So I'm not saying that you have to just jump in and do exactly that type of work, but it primes the discussion that you're going to have with them. So my approach is that, yeah, I came with some ideas for what I would do during the time, but then it's really a discussion that is bilateral and bidirectional with the research crew and particularly the lab lead as well. So I would say come with your own ideas, but be open to do whatever their research goals are as well, and leave it open as well, because you might find that the research, even if it's different to what you initially planned, it could actually be something you end up being more interested in and also being far more impactful for your field and Australian society as well, which is the more important thing. But I would do your work ahead of time and then come in primed for that discussion. I think that's the easiest way to get success from this.
Yep, absolutely. Great advice. So do you need to be published in a paper in order to apply? No, you don't have to have any kind of publications history. I think if you do have publications history, you can definitely add that to your application, but there's nothing in the rules that says you have to have published in order to apply or be successful. So no. And last, interruptions to an internship to do a Fulbright a problem with the home hospital. So that might be, what do you guys think? Do you think you could interrupt an internship to undertake a Fulbright?
It's definitely, I think, a question for APRA and PMC, because I know it's changed. So I got through my internship completely. I was doing the 1-year internship. I know it's changed to 2 now. So I had finished it completely. So I'm not affected by that. But it's something I keep in the back of my mind, because I know the rules are a little bit sticky sometimes, and I'm constantly thinking about my registration. The other thing I want to really quickly note, if someone does want to do an MPH specifically, is that the RACP, if you want to be a public health physician, needs you to send your degree and all of the units that you've done for eligibility for it to be approved in Australia. And there are some times where people have to do extra units in Australia after having done a degree in the US or abroad, anywhere, if they feel like it hasn't quite matched up with what they expect of Australians. It's just something to note.
Yep, really good point. Well, look, thank you so much. We've gone over time, but just some really, really fantastic questions there. So I just wanted to make sure we got through them. Big thanks to Dr. Britt Suann, Dr. Stephen Bacchi, and Dr. Joshua Kovoor for staying a bit longer to answer those questions and for helping facilitate this session. If you have any further questions, our panelists' emails are just there. You could reach out to us at fulbright@fulbright.org.au. If you want to recap any of this info, as mentioned, we'll be sending this recording out to your email following the session. But again, just wanted to thank you all for joining. It's been great to speak to hear your questions, and it's been fantastic to hear the insights from our Fulbright scholars. Big thanks. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon or evening if you're abroad, and yeah, we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.